Tell me a fact and I'll learn. Tell me a truth and I'll believe. But tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever. The Names Not Numbers Oral History Film Documentary Project is remembering the stories of the Holocaust and is telling the story of the Holocaust for the world to hear, for the world to learn, and to inspire future generations to combat anti-Semitism and all forms of hatred and intolerance. Over 2,500 survivors and 6,000 students have participated in it worldwide. The students were instructed by teachers and professionals. They learned interviewing techniques from journalists. They learned filming techniques and editing skills from documentary filmmakers. The students interviewed, filmed, and edited the 2-hour interviews with each survivor to make 20-minute oral histories that are compiled in the Names Not Numbers documentary at the school. You're about to view the documentary Names Not Numbers, a movie in the making. This film chronicles the students as they are being trained by the professionals and includes their reflections. In it is embedded approximately 10 minutes from each interview. This is the students' work, their filmed and edited interviews. Through this project, our students are preserving history, and they are the witnesses to the witnesses.
Names Not Numbers is a term to describe how every Jew has a name.
How they're more than just what the term is on them. They have real names, they have real characters.
Not just a tattoo that they received.
We're bringing to light stories of people.
The only way that things like this won't happen again is if we remember them and learn about them. And we're one of the last generations to be able to speak with them and interview them and learn their stories. And by us videoing them and learning from them, we pass it on to the next generation.
Okay, good morning everybody. Thank you all for this opportunity to just frame the day and introduce the day. This year, you have the opportunity to interview survivors, to learn about their stories.
I was very excited when I found out that I was going to be doing Names Not Numbers because I think it's a very important program. There's less and less survivors.
After the survivors are all gone, I think it's our job to make sure that this information gets passed down from each generation.
And this is what I want you to listen to and listen for. I want you to listen to and listen for those stories of heroism.
Yesterday, we had the privilege to go to the United States Holocaust Museum together. We walked through the whole story of the rise of Nazism, through the horrors of the death camps, and through the amazing miracles of liberation.
My experience at the museum yesterday was a little bit surprising because it was a lot harder to walk through and see how hard it was.
I learned a lot from Mr. Kuntner and at the museum. I was really nervous because I didn't know that much, but after the museum I felt much better because I knew much more.
We observed how the anti-Semitism that our families experienced back then in Eastern Europe, the beginning of the Holocaust, is not too dissimilar to what we're experiencing today. And this is why we must never forget.
It's very important to me to learn about the Holocaust because when I have children, they're not going to physically meet Holocaust survivors. So I think it's very important that I meet them so I could tell their story.
It's important that we interview Holocaust survivors so we know what really actually happened.
20 years from now, I think the people who will be telling the story of the Holocaust is our generation. That's the only real way people are going to know, and we have to tell people about the Holocaust.
This is Tova's intro. She is the founder of Names Not Numbers.
Tova Rosenberg spoke about why it's important for us to continue to do this.
Today, 75 years after the end of the Holocaust, 31% of all Americans believe that 2 million or fewer Jews were killed in the Holocaust. But we have documentation. We have unique historical documents that preserve certain facets of life during the Holocaust in real time. In the Warsaw Ghetto, the Onyx Shabbos archives were buried in 1942 and included the last will and testament of David Graber. And he wrote, "What we were unable to cry and scream out to the world, we buried in the ground. So the world may know it all. May it alarm and alert the world to what happened." The pasuk from Parashat Ha'azinu is more timely than ever. Zachor Yemot Olam. Remember the days of old. Sha'al avicha v'yagedcha. Ask your father, and he will tell you. When living history becomes a memory, it will be you, the students who participated in Names Not Numbers. Through your documentary, you will remember the days of old, Zachor Yemot Olam. Our Names Not Numbers students are learning history, recording history, and preserving history through their work.
So what we're going to show you now is a video of students that were your age who produced an interview with a survivor.
And the train started moving. The doors opened up, and two high-ranking officers, a Hungarian officer and an SS officer, announced on the loudspeaker. And they said, "From this moment on, you are under the command of the German army." On the 5th day, the train stopped, and they look out again, and they see a name that they have never seen before. And they ask around in the wagon, anybody ever heard the name Auschwitz? We lined up, and this was the last time I saw my mother, Alea Shalom, my 5 sisters, and 6 children, nephews and nieces.
When I thought of that video, it was a really crazy story, and just hearing the question at the very end about what he would ask his parents or what he would say to his parents if he could see them again, hearing that he could say that he misses them stuck out to me. Like, I almost started crying from that.
If you could speak to your parents today, what would you say to them?
I would tell them that I miss them. That I'm glad that I'm a part of the family, that they were wonderful to me, and that we are continuing their legacy.
Today, Yochi Driesen, a professional journalist, came to us to talk about how to properly ask questions and interview survivors.
It was mentioned a moment ago before I started about preparation, and that is key. Knowing as much as you can about the person you're speaking to. Questions should be concise. They should be short. They should really be something like, what happened then? What happened next?
I learned from Yochi Driesen that it's very important that because all Holocaust survivors live through deeply traumatic events, it's very important if they get emotional to just give them a moment to breathe and recollect themselves.
You know, you may have done a lot of research and you think, okay, I know this person's story for the most part. And they're talking and suddenly you're like, whoa, wait, what was that? When you hear that, if you are surprised, ask them. Even if it's not written down as a question, follow that path wherever it takes you, because probably you'll get good stuff from it, stuff that's interesting and compelling.
Just go ahead. Filming technique, take one. Okay. Perfect.
I thought the session about learning how to use the cameras went very well. I learned how to orient the cameras.
The rule of thirds, basically, as you can see on this screen, is that you divide your screen in 3 thirds, right? Horizontal and then also vertical. Why do we do that? It's a kind of like a rule that was created to create images that are appealing to the eye. And there's a bunch of studies, and it applies to any type of visual arts.
I learned that the front one, like the front rotating thing on the camera, it's the focus. So I remember that that's gonna start with B, and the last one was zoom, or to like zoom out or zoom in.
Anywhere where the lines meet, that's going to be considered a point of focus. So you want to set your subject, or where you want people's attention to go to, you want to set it in any of those points of focus, okay?
We're taught about how to use a camera in the beginning. I learned a lot about how it should be focused on the subject, how there should be multiple points of view at once to focus on the person in case you want to switch things around when you cut it and edit it.
My dear 8th grade students, this is a journey this year. This is part of your 8th grade experience.
By sharing these survivor stories, you are going to open up people's minds. You're going to light a spark, and you're going to stand up to hatred and prejudice.
So take this opportunity to listen for stories of bravery, of courage.
May your efforts creating this documentary not only serve as a tribute to the strength of the survivors, but also as a beacon of light for the entire world who right now is in need of healing and understanding. Our work here is really important.
We are in the boardroom of the Berman Hebrew Academy. We are here to interview a Holocaust survivor.
This is our 4th year doing Names Not Numbers, and the kids anticipate it every single year. It's become part of the culture of our school. And so the kids look forward to meeting a survivor, interviewing a survivor, and really making the learning come alive each and every year. Finally comes the time where they get to actually interview them and meet them. And this is the first time that they are meeting them this week.
It's important to keep talking about the Holocaust because I think we should be able to tell their stories.
We're probably one of the last generations to be able to meet a real Holocaust survivor, and we need to feel the feelings that they did.
Like every year, the students are a little nervous coming in. They're eager to do the project, but in many cases, the students have not been around a Holocaust survivor, or they haven't been around one who's not their own relative. But I think there's this angst because they also know that they're the custodians of these people's stories.
It's important to keep talking about the Holocaust so people remember what happened. It wasn't just like a war. We are strong, people survived, and we're here today.
I'm Susan Warsinger. I was born on May 27th, 1929, in Bad Kreuznach, Germany. It was a small town in the western part of Germany. We were very Orthodox. We kept kosher. I went to synagogue on Shabbos. My mother stayed home and took care of her children. And my father had a linen store, and it was a thriving linen store, and he made a good living for us, and we lived in a very nice house.
My name is Louis Sosnowick. I was born in Poland. It was a small town called Nowy Bohost. I had a sister. My father was a flax merchant. The majority of the people there were non-Jews. The Jewish people in my town were absolutely all Orthodox. Holidays were a big deal. They were a big deal because it entailed extra special meals.
My name is Mark Kazanov. I was born in 1933. I was born in Ukraine, and the name of the city, Dnepropetrovsk, now they changed it to Dnipro.
Was your family religious?
Are religious? Oh, they was Jewish. From my father's side, they was more religious. From my mom's side, and my grandfather, and he was not so religious man. Probably they go to synagogue. I don't remember. I didn't go to synagogue because my parents was a different generation. In Soviet Union, you cannot go to synagogue, otherwise you will have a trouble.
My name is Nathan Lewin. I was born January 31, 1936 in Lodz, Poland. Before the war, my father, Zachrono Livracha, was elected to the city council of Lodz. My family was my father, my mother, and I was then the only son. My father was the son of the Reisha Rav, Rabbi Aaron Levine, the rabbi of Rzeszów, a very leading figure in the Orthodox community of Poland before the war, and one of the founders of Agudat Yisrael. And he had been elected twice to the Polish Sejm.
What is your name?
Manny Kandel. I was born in officially June 15, 1938. I was born in a small town called Sikilia, which is located in Ukraine. My mother's name was Rivka Gibol, and my father's name was Pinchas Gibol. By pictures that I've seen, they were all observant Jews. My mother worked for her father in a makeshift, some kind of grocery retail, a little store somewhere in Sikilia. And my father was part of the Gibor family who traded in grain.
My name is Marcia Tischler, and I'm a child Holocaust survivor.
When were you born?
Gee. Whoa. I was born in May of 1942 in a small town called Holoby in Poland, which is near the Ukrainian border. The town is surrounded by very fertile fields and forests, all of which played an important part in my parents' survival. Well, my grandparents had a small store. They sold mainly bolts of fabric, and my mother worked in the store.
Describe what you were told like Shabbat and other holidays were like in your home before the war.
Shabbat was wonderful, and all the holidays were exceptionally wonderful as well. You know, everyone worked so hard, but Fridays, they bathed, they cleaned. The table was always set beautifully with an abundance of food and with all the family around.
The Jewish people stayed among themselves. The Christians stayed among themselves. So you would walk on the street and somebody would come toward you, and the first thing they would scream, Żyd do Palestini, go to Palestine.
My father, as a member of the Lodz City Council, was the target of a lot of very anti-Semitic open attacks on the Jews, in which they told him, go to Palestine at the time. I mean, which is quite amazing, given that more recently, and I've written about that, and it appeared in the Wall Street Journal, that today they're saying, go to Poland, go back to Poland. But the Polish were saying, go to Palestine, because they were trying to drive the Jews out of Poland. The Jews were a very important factor in the community in Poland.
Everybody knew that I was Jewish, and there was nobody who was my friend there. I certainly realized that when the teacher was reading those picture storybooks She was reading books similar to a book that we have in the museum. It's called Der Giftpilz, which is called A Poisoned Mushroom. And she was reading this book to the children and others similar to it, which showed that Jews were poisoned mushrooms. And the kids became very mean to me. And I told my mom every day I don't want to go to public school anymore. One day I was very happy. There was a law in Germany that Jewish children weren't allowed to go to public school anymore. I had to switch schools because our parents wanted us to go to school, and they hired a teacher, and this teacher taught all the Jewish kids in our school.
There was no great love lost between the populace there and the Jewish residents. On the two major holidays in the Christian world, namely Christmas and Easter, the people would come out of the church after the priests beefed them up with some extra hatred for the Jews, fostering anti-Semitic outbursts.
The first incident I vividly recall looking out the window. It was a cold day, and a goy, a Gentile, was hitting my grandfather with a stick. And I remember saying to my mother, "A goy schluckt dem Zede." A goy is hitting my grandfather. I remember that incident.
My mother had received an education at the University of Berlin, and after she married my father and they moved to Lodz, she kept current with the news that was coming from Nazi Germany. So she knew about Kristallnacht and about what Hitler was doing in Germany.
What happened to your family during the night of the Kristallnacht?
Our neighbors uprooted a lamppost and they carried it on their shoulders, and they smashed our front door, which was made out of glass, and the glass was strewn all over our hall floor. And my brother looked to see who was throwing bricks and rocks through our window, and it was our neighbors. Well, my father thought that we would be safer if we went up to the attic in our building, and that's what we did.
My mother alerted my father and got him to agree that if Hitler came into Poland, we would immediately flee and leave Lodz, and that's what we did.
Poland, September 1939. The German foe begins its ruthless march of conquest and sets the stage for World War II. Poland's 34 million inhabitants, crushed, scattered, and enslaved.
And my father had a linen store, but after the Nazis came into power, they boycotted his store. He didn't make a living anymore after that, so we had to move from our nice house and move to a smaller place.
The Nazis crossed the river that was near Halabi. They came by trains, motorcycles with sidebars. They came by trucks loaded with their people. Also, the first day they came, they put up notice. All Jews had to be registered. All Jews had to wear white armbands with the blue Magen David. You know, there were signs that said, "No Jews allowed."
The war started, I know that it was announced on the radio, but I was 7 years old. I don't know what's happening. My parents probably knows. We have only one radio, one station. So everything what we know, it was from the Moscow radio. We didn't know everything was going on. One day, local government tell us to dig trenches. in our backyard against the bomb, because the German will come and bomb us. One day, my mom wake me up 4 o'clock in the morning, and they put blanket of me, and we went to this trench. And let me tell you, German very precise. Every day, in 4 o'clock in the morning, they come and bomb us. And then again was sign that bombs the plane is left and we can get out. We can out. All of a sudden it starts some kind of panic in the city, because we didn't anything, but probably German start coming close. And my father was drafted all of a sudden, not to army. And my father every time come home and said that it will be not so safe. Be careful, don't go on the street.
The next step was to put all the Jewish people into a ghetto. A ghetto was a way to ingather all these Jews who were spread out all over the place. The idea was to bring them all together so they will be centrally available for extermination. Getting food in the ghetto was really problematic. You were able to get food by having contacts outside the ghetto, or you had some kind of jewelry that you could barter with somebody who would smuggle in potatoes for you, smuggle in a loaf of bread for you.
And my mother and father was in a ghetto, a small ghetto in the town of Roshish. During the time that my mother and father was in the ghetto, I was hidden at this farmer's house by the name of Vasil.
Some months later, they would execute the destruction of the ghetto. And the only reason we saved ourselves was because we came out of the ghetto, and my father noticed that everybody was running to the right. To the left was a major highway, and the major highway had German military vehicles coming and going. When my father saw that everybody was running to the right, he said, you know, I think we're going to chance it and go to the left, because once you did cross the road, you were then in low shrub type area. And that is the only way that we're saved, because everybody that ran to the right was destroyed.
My parents, my mother and father, escaped from the ghetto. The next sequence I remember, I was stashed away in the attic of a friendly native Ukrainian. His name was Vasil, and they hid me out in the attic, which was called a boydom in Yiddish, or maybe it's Ukrainian for all I know. And they covered me with straw and hid me there for whatever time it was. How long I was there, I don't know, but I do remember that they snuck me out of that boydom to take me to my parents, to my mother and father in the Partisans. What I remember is Vasil had a wagon full of straw. Someone took me and threw me into this wagon, covered me with straw, and once I was covered with straw, he took off, and I remember the horses ran like hell. The strongest memory I have about food is that I was always hungry. The hunger was an overwhelming factor when we were in the Partisans. It was a very critical time, specifically for my mother, because she was alone. My father went out with a group of members of the partisan group to look for food, to find food among the Goyim, among the Ukrainians who lived in the area. They would go out and steal whatever they could steal for the group. I remembered hearing this. I don't specifically remember the incident, that they came back and my father didn't. We were told, again, this is hearing the story from my mother, that he was very tired and he sat down to rest and froze to death. One of the most heartbreaking incidents I remember is there was a time where some Ukrainians attacked the group of Jews and the partisans. I remember vividly someone yelling, "Ankläuft, ankläuft, run away Jews, ankläuft Jiden, run away, the Goyim are here." And my mother was running with me. I remember it being snow, very white, and her shoes were torn. She was running, holding me, trying to protect me. Her face, she was a red-headed lady, and she had pintalach. What do you call it? Freckles. Thank you. She had freckles. Her tears were frozen. I could see the agony. I remember her face was so red. Her hair was disheveled, streaming, and people yelling, run away Jews. Ankläuft Jiden, ankläuft means run away Jews. I remember that. Oh, how I remember that. It was very tough times, and she had expressed many, many times how difficult life was, because she was all alone with a small child to care for. And with a small child who was always threatened not to make any noise because someone would hear and I would give their positions away. So that was a major problem, major concern for my mother. My mother, may she rest in peace, took care of her son, took care of her child. That's all she had left was me. There was always incident of the German Air Force would be try to bomb the rail station to stop the movement of troops. And every now and then one of the planes would crash. We would run to find the crash because we would cut out from the tires, which was a solid rubber, we would cut out little balls. We would, they'd bounce like hell. We would, that was a game we would play. As I said to someone, that was the first pinky. Anybody from New York knows what a pinky is.
After Kristallnacht, all the Jewish people wanted to leave Germany, but it was hard to get out of Germany because the United States had big quotas. And so my father said he wanted his children to get out of Germany. So he found a lady who was a French lady who promised she would take us across the border and smuggle us into France, my brother and I. We missed our parents very much because when we left them, it was very hard to leave our parents. My parents stayed in their house in Bad Kreuznach in Germany. So all we did most of the time was wait for correspondence from our parents. In May of 1940, that's when the Germans invaded Paris. We were very frightened because we heard the German army marching into Paris. 2 nuns got a hold of my brother and me, and we went with a lot of people, and we all ended up in Versailles. They sent my brother and me to a children's home in a place called Brou-Vernay, which was near Vichy. We didn't have all the things that you get to eat here in the United States. But I remember we had strawberries once, and it was a big treat for everybody to have strawberries. In the Chateau de Morel, where we stayed, all the kids had to write to their parents. But most of the time we didn't get any answers. And I have some of the letters, and these letters are always saying, write to us, write to us. And every once in a while we heard from our parents, so we knew they were still alive.
I was telling you about my father being a flax merchant. My father made it a point to know the farmers, to know where the farmers live, and to have a personal relationship with the farmer while dealing with the flax. This was the key reason for my being able to be here and talk to you. These are the people that saved our lives. Picture this, we crossed this to the left and came to the first farm that was nearest. And the operation would be my father would knock on the window, the farmer would come to the window, it's dark, and he would recognize my father right away, and my father would say, look, can you please let us rest, rest. So the farmer said, not in the house because it's too dangerous. Please understand that if we were caught at this farmer's house, the farmer, his family would be destroyed, killed right on the spot, and the place would be incinerated, the whole farm and all his possessions. If somebody saw us there and reported us to the authorities, if you will, they would get 4 pounds of salt per Jew. Salt was impossible to get because of the wars and all the uproars. And the way that they would, there was no refrigeration. So the way that they would preserve meat would be by salting it. Now, once in a while, the farmer would say, look, there are Germans about, 1 kilometer away. He says, it's way too dangerous here, but I'll tell you what, my brother-in-law, or some relative, lives about 3 clicks from here, and I'll tell you how to get there. You go there, tell them that I sent you, and they would put us up. This was the only way to survive the Russian winter for us. It was the only way to survive the Russian bitter winter. Then, when things got warmer, we would hide out in the woods where there were partisans.
In 1941, all of a sudden, my father came and said, you should immediately leave the city. Russian propaganda said that the war probably will take 2 months and we will win. Me, my mom, and my brother, we start walking. We pass the bridge through Dnieper River and stay in the small city, it's called Novomoskovsk. And we stay in waiting when war will finish. Okay, when we left and come to the railroad station, it was some kind of commercial train. It was an open platform. We were sitting on the top of the platform. It was scary for me because it was commercial train. And they didn't know, we didn't know when it stopped, where we're going. And every time when the train stopped, and I remember my mom has a kettle to get some hot water, and I was so afraid that I can lose my mom because nobody knows how long the train will stay. And we came to the city, it's called Makhachkala before. It's a Caspian Sea. Somebody tell us, go to the pier, because we should cross the Caspian Sea and go further. And I remember it was sitting, somebody told it was 30,000 people was sitting and waiting for the commercial ship. It's a tanker. And we cross the Caspian Sea. So anyway, we came to Krasnovodsk. And I remember that I was hungry every day. I said, Mom, I'm hungry. And like I said, she said, you're not hungry, you just want to eat. They give us 1 pound bread for each one.
I was born in May of 42. Right before Rosh Hashanah in early September, a demand came for goods that the Jewish community could not possibly fulfill because everything, you know, they had given away everything already. The elderly man who was the head of the Judenrat said, Jews, it's just a pretext. You now have to do what you need to do, run. So my parents fled with me to the forests, and that was, as I said, just before Rosh Hashanah 1942.
How long were you and your parents in the forest for?
3 days, freezing cold at night. There was no food. I cried. I became sick. There were other people in the forest. Father thought that I could not survive. My mother had no food. She couldn't nurse me. She was in a terrible situation, especially since they thought they would be picked up at any moment, and also because my cries jeopardized the other Jews in the forest. After 3 days, my mother very reluctantly allowed him and his best friend to take me, to put me on the doorstep of a farmhouse. And for 2.5 years, they kept me safe. Collaborators did come with knives to kill me. And Vasilina and Alexander bribed them. They gave them the best that they could. And they went away and they said, oh, we'll come another time. The commandant from the area came, and Vasilina wanted so much for me to be quiet, but of course I wasn't. And so the commandant came over, and I was chuckling and playing. He was playing, and he turned around and he said to her, it's good, keep her. I was baptized in our Syrian church, and I was their child. So after my father and Yankel dropped me at the home, so my dad ran back to where my mother was, told her that I was safe. So they knew they were not safe there. And so they went further in. And so for 2.5 years, they existed in that, finding shelter sometimes in a barn, if the farmer would allow them to sleep overnight. But the rest of the time, nature was very difficult. And of course, all that time, they were being hounded.
I heard many stories afterwards about how we crossed the border into Lithuania and how I, as a 3-year-old, was carried through the forest in the middle of the night. The Lithuanians did not authorize people to cross the border from Poland. You had to do so secretly. And we did in the middle of the night, and my mother frequently told me the story about how I was carried through the forest as a 3-year-old in the middle of the night. One of the people who actually carried me was someone who we frequently hosted in our home in New York. It was a rabbi with a long red beard, and his name was Shapsa Frankel. And it's a name that's familiar today to many people who know and have authoritative editions of the Rambam, of Maimonides' Code of Jewish Law, because he always had the ambition to issue a complete set of the Mishnah Torah, of the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, with all the Nosei Kalim, all the authorities that were written about it after he came to the United States and was a very successful businessman. He issued this edition of the Mishnah Torah, the Shapsa Frankel edition. He personally carried me when I was 3 years old through the forests to escape from Poland into Lithuania. We came to Vilna, and from Vilna, my mother, because she had read and heard about all the stories which caused us to believe that, she said it was no longer safe to stay in Vilna. And she thought that because she had been a Dutch citizen, there was a way of leaving from Vilna to the Dutch East Indies, to Java and Sumatra. And when she went to the Dutch consul, he told her that the Dutch are issuing no visas for permission to enter the Dutch East Indies to non-Dutch citizens because of the danger of Japanese takeover of the Dutch East Indies. Jews who were in Vilna and who had the funds or had gotten the funds through some aid were able to buy tickets on the Trans-Siberian Railroad. It was a 3-week journey, which went from Moscow to the other end of the Soviet Union in Vladivostok. I was then 4 years old, and we traveled from Moscow to Vladivostok, and we took a ship from Vladivostok to the city of Kobe. The Jewish community of Kobe, which had been funded by various wealthy Jews, was open to the immigrants who were fleeing from Nazi Germany, to Jewish immigrants. In Kobe, my father, my mother, my grandmother, and my uncle were all in Kobe, as I was, for a period of months. There was a small group of rabbis, which included Rabbi Aaron Kotler and some others, who were paroled. We were allowed to come into the United States. We were not given a visa of any kind. And with that permission, my father and I came by ship from Yokohama to San Francisco in March of 1940. My mother ultimately came to the United States after my father and I had gone from San Francisco across the United States, first to St. Louis, where my father knew Rabbi Eichenstein.
Well, we were liberated by the Russian army. We were in the woods when suddenly out of the clear blue sky we heard trucks coming on a major road through the woods. And so we thought right away that they're obviously Germans and ran further away. But some people said, no, 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 they're not Germans. They have a red star marking on them, which was the Russian army. And I mean, you know, suddenly it dawned on us that we are being freed, we're being liberated. Started running toward the trucks.
Who liberated you?
Army liberated us, because I was not in a concentration camp. So when army went farther and farther to the border, and my city was liberated, and we found out that our city liberated, my mom said that I want to go home. It's time to go home. We went home. But when we came to the city, unfortunately, we didn't get our apartment. When we came back, they gave us communal apartment. It was one room. I, my mom, and my brother lived, and in the corridor it was another room. It's another woman lived with a small child. But what's happening, my mom became very sick. She has a heart trouble. And it was a terrible story. I don't want to tell you, but I lost my mom. My mom died when I was 12 years old, probably. When I lost my mom, I was by myself. I was orphan, and I was stayed almost on the street for a whole year. That whole year it was terrible for me, very, very terrible. All of a sudden, my aunt found me. My aunt was living, and my mom's sister, she lived in Moscow. And somehow she found me. And she came to Dnepropetrovsk and take me to Moscow. They brought me to Moscow, and they adopted me. In the rest of my life, I lived with the family, my aunt. My rest of my life, I lived in Moscow with this family.
When we came out of the woods, the partisans, we ended up in a town called Rafalovka. My mother met a gentleman who she married and became my stepfather in this town. It was a couple, I remember, who started gathering the Jews, and that was the first beginning of us starting to move towards the West, and of course ultimately trying to get to Palestine at that time. And my sister was born in Italy, as I said, and beautiful lady. She became a beautiful lady. Unfortunately, cancer took her away. I don't remember the sequence, but we traveled from Ukraine through Germany, through Czechoslovakia, through Romania, and finally in Austria. I think I know the jump-off point for Israel or Palestine was Italy. And in Italy, we lived about 4 years in DP camps.
Once my parents got me back, and I became part of that family. I did not really have friends until after the Shoah, when we illegally made our way to Italy, to a DP camp. Right after the war, my parents could not stay in Poland anymore. The Italian people were very kind to us. We were there for 4.5 years. Once Israel became a state, a lot of the people in the camp decided to go to Israel rather than wait for sponsorship to America or elsewhere. Now, my parents dearly wanted to go to Israel, but I was very sick. And so they opted to wait for my mother's uncle to sponsor us in America, to come to America.
We went to Spain because we finally heard from our parents, and our parents had gotten to the United States, and they found us because the highest organization, and they sent us tickets to come to the United States.
Well, I don't recall much about St. Louis, really. We were there for a short period of time. My father moved to New York, where he first settled in Williamsburg. By then, my mother came to the United States. My father insisted that I not continue at Ramaz, which had then had a high school that had started a few years earlier, but that I go to Yeshiva University High School. And then I went to Yeshiva College, and from Yeshiva College, where I also succeeded, and I went on to Harvard Law School. But when the final exams were given at the end of the year, I ended up 6th in a class of 500. And I was invited to join the Harvard Law Review, and from then on, my life in the United States was blessed, and I had a very successful and fruitful career as a practicing lawyer in the United States.
Describe your family today.
My family today, I got married in 1962 to Ricky Gordon. We had 2 daughters, Aliza Doba and Nama Bhatia. My daughter Aliza Doba has 4 children. My daughter Nama Bhatia has 2 children.
What kinds of cases did you argue before the Supreme Court?
I argued both secular and religious cases. The Kippah case, the Yarmulke case, was an early case on the right to practice one's religion, even in the military. But I also argued on behalf of Chabad for the right to put up a Hanukkah menorah as part of Pittsburgh's holiday display. I argued that in the Supreme Court, and I won that case, and then won several subsequent cases establishing the constitutional right to include a menorah in a public display.
The Hayas and had arranged for, and the Quakers had arranged for us to get on the ship, and all the 50 children that were on the ship had to have a tag, and they had to have their picture on the tag and their name and where they were going in the United States. And my brother and I had a different tag because because the Quakers helped us. And so we had a different tag, and on the tag it had all of our identification, and that's how we got on the ship.
Can you describe the boat ride to America?
Oh, yes. It was 14 days. Now it doesn't take that long. The ship was like a cruise ship, but in those days, the ships were much smaller than the cruise ships of today. And I tell you, the waves were very heavy. And my brother, he spent a lot of time at the railing and emptying out the insides of whatever he had eaten that day. And he was sick a lot.
How did you contact your parents to meet up with you in New York?
Oh, I guess the Hayas must have told them that we were on that ship, and they must have gotten in touch with them. I didn't do any get in contact with them. All I know is when the ship came into the harbor, my father was there waiting for us. I was very happy because I hadn't seen them for 2 years, and all the time I was so worried about being able to see them. It was a wonderful occasion. Well, the first thing I wanted to be reunited with my parents and the baby, my baby brother. And the other thing is I was looking for, I could go to public school, and I could go to public school without being bullied and without being called names because I was Jewish. I know that there was freedom of speech, and I was so happy to be in a place where I could go to parks and they wouldn't have signs on them, no Jews allowed. I was happy I was going to be able to go to the movies and go there even if I was Jewish. So I was very happy to be in a place where there was no anti-Semitism. My father was believed very strongly at that time that his children needed to have a better education than he did, and he wanted to make sure that all of us went to college. So I was the oldest in the family, so he made sure that I went to the University of Maryland. First of all, I got married to my husband, and then we had children, and then I went back to school to be a teacher, and I was a teacher for 27 years. Oh, my family today, oh, I have to brag about them. I have 3 daughters, and these 3 daughters got married, and each one of them had 3 children, so I have 9 grandchildren, and all of them except 2 are married, and they have children, and I have 7 great-grandchildren with another one on the way. And I'm very happy. I have a wonderful family.
The way to get into the United States in the mid to later 40s was to have a sponsor, and a sponsor that was acceptable to the U.S. government was somebody in the family, an uncle, somebody who had a business, who was a doctor, who would guarantee to the U.S. government that you would not become a burden, you the refugee. I think it was in 1948 that they passed a law here in the United States that you could be sponsored by an entity that offered you a job. So there were some people here who knew of our name, and they found a synagogue. It was a very important synagogue. So Joshua Klavin's synagogue, somebody arranged for them to issue a guarantee of some sort of a job as a Baal Koreh in their synagogue, which was in Southwest Washington. And that is the only reason why we fell into Washington. Immediately got a job. My first job was working as a porter in a grocery store, you know, sweeping up, taking out the trash, stuff like that. I progressed to some other jobs, but I immediately went to night school in order to get a high school diploma, because my wish was to be university educated, no matter what. And we came here at the very beginning of 1950, and believe it or not, in 1951, I was accepted to George Washington University. When I became an adult, and my wife felt the same way, is that we wanted to have children, and we felt that having children meant that we defeated Hitler. I have 3 sons. They're all married. I have 9 grandchildren, and so far I have, thank God, 10 great-grandchildren. Thank God, about a family of 30. And most of them are religious. In fact, some of them are more religious than I.
My stepfather got a visa in Italy to come to the United States. He was sponsored by his relatives. And I ended up in Washington. It's a very simple story. But my thoughts and my wishes were always to be in Israel, participate with Israel, be part of Israel. And I wish all of you would follow that, not follow me, of course, but follow the notion of being with fellow Jews and support Israel. And we arrived to America in 1949, in May of 1949.
Once we came here, I was fortunate to attend Beis Yaakov School for Girls in Baltimore. By the time we came here, I had one brother who attended Talmudical Academy, and then another brother was born in Baltimore, and he attended Talmudical Academy. I taught in high school, first of all, in Baltimore at Forest Park High School. I also taught at the community college, and I also ended up teaching at Towson University. And then I switched to working for the Baltimore Jewish Council. I was director of Holocaust programming for remembering and commemoration of the Holocaust for about 8 years until we moved here. And I am retired and have a wonderful family for which I'm grateful. So my husband and I are both retired. We have 2 wonderful daughters, one living in the area, one living in Boston, 2 wonderful sons-in-law, 4 wonderful grandchildren. Of course they're wonderful, ranging in age from 22 to 17. 1 granddaughter.
If you could see your parents again today, what would you say to them?
I love you. I thank you for all you did for me, and all you tried to do, and all you taught me. I wish you could see your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. You know, people light a yahrzeit candle, a memorial candle, when they know the dates that the person or the people died. I don't know the dates for the 33 members of my parents' immediate families. And so I speak to you. That's my way of lighting a candle.
One thing that I will cherish from the experience is being able to hear a Holocaust survivor's story in person, face to face.
I actually enjoy this, not in a sense of entertainment, but in a sense of just being able to be one of the last generations to witness testimony from a Holocaust survivor.
When I found out that I was doing names, not numbers, I was really nervous, but it was a lot better than I thought it was going to be.
It was a very meaningful experience to hear her story, her perspective, and really understand what she was going through, not just what the Holocaust was, but the Holocaust in her eyes was.
Since I'm a Sephardi Jew, it was very meaningful to learn about the Holocaust because none of my family was in Poland in the time and Germany, so it was very meaningful.
It was definitely a really amazing experience to meet Mr. Sosnowiec and interview him. I will take with me everything that he taught me and told me. I will do what he told us, to have kids and teach them, and because as he said, having kids is defeating Hitler.
I feel very lucky that I got to meet a survivor. I have survivors in my family, though they don't ever talk about the Holocaust, so this was really powerful for me, and I just say thank you for coming.
It was my first time having the chance to interview a Holocaust survivor, and I think it was a pretty cool experience. Interviewing someone that was in the Holocaust, they can tell us their story about what happened. Instead of us reading it online, we can actually hear them say what happened.
If an upcoming 8th grader asks me about the Names Not Numbers project, I'll tell them that it's a great opportunity to talk with a Holocaust survivor and learn about a story you may not ever get to hear.
I would recommend this project to other 8th graders so that they understand the stories that and the impact on people.
You should really take advantage of the opportunity. The other generations after us, they won't be able to meet Holocaust survivors and they won't know from a primary source.
People don't understand how it really was, and learning about the Holocaust. I mean, before this year, I just thought oh, there were Nazis and they killed a lot of Jews, but I mean, it's a lot more than that. And I feel like it should be something that is taught more because I really just didn't know a lot about the Holocaust before now. What is your message to our generation?
So happy you asked that question. I want future generations to understand that this horror in our history started gradually. Nazis could not have done it without the help of ordinary people who helped them commit their murders. In the world at the present time, all of us need to be brave and be aware about what is happening, and we need to work together to prevent people from being murdered for the simple reason that they're different. Never again do we want to do nothing.
Let's fight against killing people. It doesn't matter what kind of people. Jewish people, Christian people, still people kill people. Let's fight from this one. Let's educate people. People shouldn't peace, like people said, don't build wall, build bridges, yes? This is my point.
My parents, Vasilina and Alexander, left me with a legacy. Vasilina and Alexander, non-Jews, who did what they thought was best, was right, did so with courage and with compassion. And my parents left me with a legacy. My dad, who said he wasn't going to remain a victim. Bad things happen to people, you don't forget them, but you have to go forward.
The message I have for your generation is to continue positive identification and support of Judaism and Jewish interests. Do not allow yourself to be in any way discouraged or prevented from expressing your Jewish identity and your love for the state of Israel, which I think is mandatory on the part of every Jew. It has been part of our tradition for centuries to view Jerusalem and Israel as the land of our forefathers to which we have a right to live in and to enjoy in peace.
The foremost issue should be what do I do and how do I do to support the Jewish people? I take great pride in the Jewish accomplishment. For a small group of people in this world, we've done damn well. I want to take my time to live a better life, to help other people, to be part of the Jewish community, to enjoy Israel. Because really that's the only way to combat anti-Semitism.
Somebody asked a Holocaust survivor why their experiences didn't make them bitter for the rest of their life. And this was their answer. I learned friendship from Auschwitz. I learned friendship from Auschwitz. When I was cold, strangers shielded me with their bodies from the blowing winds because they had nothing to offer except themselves. In war, in the horror of the most terrible times, in the Holocaust, and we're seeing in Israel today, people still found friendship, still found ways to care for each other. And that's another way that we find faith in the God that resides inside each and every person. We have faith in humanity that we lost so much of, but we have moments where we see it and we can believe in it again. Ani mami, ani mami, ani mami, be'emuna shelema, beviat HaMashiach. Beviat HaMashiach ani mamin, Beviat HaMashiach, Beviat HaMashiach ani mamin.